Good evening, folks. Welcome to another session that falls under the series Not Eligible for PDD. Now what? So, in light of that, we have brought in two employment folks specialists from Gateway Association, the very organization that's organizing this whole online series. And quite often people call Gateway hoping to help someone get help to find employment. And there is that bit about waitlists. And so we wanted to make sure that folks are not disappointed or, find discouraged by the fact that they have to be on the wait list. There's still a lot of things that individuals can be doing to prepare themselves for employment. And we wanted to bring in Ashley Benson and Vicky Mancini to this conversation to talk about it. So I'm going to hand over to Ashley first, but only because of alphabetical order. And then Ashley, if you want to introduce yourself, and then Vicky, if you want to introduce yourself after that, and you guys feel free to share the screen and take it away.
Perfect. So as Sahana mentioned, my name is Ashley Benson. I am the Manager of Employer Relations for Gateway Association. And I've been working at Gateway for about 5 years now in the field of supported employment. So hopefully you guys will find this session informative. We kind of picked our main topics around stuff that is really crucial in job searching and what you can do while on the wait list. Vic, you're muted.
Sorry. I'm Vicky Mancini. I'm the Employment Supports Manager. I've been with Gateway for just a little over 10 years, 10 and a half years now, I think. And yeah, I agree with Ashley. We picked it, the topics around things that we have found are most necessary for job search success.
Perfect.
Sorry, Ash, just a tip for the viewers. If you find our faces are covering your screen, you can minimize the window so that you can look at the full screen and the PowerPoint.
Awesome. Thank you, Sahana. All right.
So what we're going to cover today is some pre-job searching tips, some understanding of your skills. We're going to go over some resumes and tips for cover letters, job searching, how to align your career goals with industry, and we're going to give you some tools and resources.
And we will have polls going throughout the session today. They're going to be true and false, and everything's anonymous. So if you aren't sure of the answer, don't worry. There's no judgment here, no matter what. But the polls are anonymous. So we hope that everybody can participate in those. You don't have to if you don't want to, but it's just, we kind of wanted to make things a little bit more engaging that way. Okay, so we're going to start with our first poll. All right, so true or false? Does an irregular sleep routine affect job searching? And then the second question is true or false? You should have at least 3 references prepared before you start applying. So feel free to throw in your vote, and then we'll share the results once everybody has voted. All right, we'll give it 5 more seconds, and then I will share our votes. Perfect. All right. So does it affect it? Most people indicated true, and at least 3, yes, true. Awesome, thanks guys for participating in the first one.
Our job's done, Ashley. All right, so these are some tips, some things that we have found. People come to us so often not knowing what to do, not knowing their skills or strengths, having no regular routines in their life. And so it really affects how job search is going, and really how motivated they are. So some things we recommend is that you eat healthy, regular meals. Take care of your physical stamina by getting exercise and fresh air. When you're job searching, ensure that you're well groomed. Like, I know during this COVID time, it's been really easy to just, let the hair grow and not look after those things that are kind of important. If you're job searching, you want to look good all the time. So have a reliable sleep routine. I know when I go on vacation, I can stay up all night and sleep till noon the next day. And then it's really hard to get back into a regular routine once I start back to work. Have clothes ready for your interview, because if you're sending out resumes and things, you never know when that call's going to come for you to come to an interview. So be ready. And make sure you communicate with your employment supports.
And so that's if, and employment supports in this case could be if, somebody who's job searching is getting support from a brother or sister or a family member. If they need support in some areas, it's good to make sure that there's some regular check-ins. A lot of these things seem very obvious, but we find that they are so frequently missed that when people come to us and they want to start looking for a job, and we're talking about, okay, they want to do a warehouse job, but, they haven't been walking around very often, and they find maybe they can only be on their feet for a couple hours a day, right? So knowing those pieces now and starting to work on those, if they do want a physical job or something where maybe you're sitting and typing, building up that physical stamina now is really important for that.
All right, so more pre-job search ideas and tips. And this one is so important. Have an idea of where you want to work, or what area. Again, people come to us so often and go, I don't know what I want. And it's because they've never had an opportunity to have any pre-employment work experience, or any of those jobs such as babysitting, or those first jobs. And so they haven't learned how to be an employee, and they haven't learned what they want. So take some time to do some research and figure out really what it is, where you want to work, and have kind of an idea of how many hours a day you want to work. Do you want to work mornings? Do you want to work afternoons? Do you want to work all day long? So it's really, really important to do your research. Research the industry you're interested in. Have an idea of what your skills and strengths are and interests are. Where do you want to work? If you had a magic wand and you could be doing whatever it is, what is it that you want to do? And do your skills and strengths match that goal of what you want to do? Have an idea of what accommodations you might need. The biggest accommodation that we find people is always for time. Maybe they can't get up in the mornings, and so they need an afternoon job. Or maybe they're like me and they really are a morning person and want to be up at 6 o'clock and working by 7. Have at least 2, but preferably 3 references that you can use on a resume. But you don't have to put them on a resume, but we'll cover that later.
Mm-hmm. And with all of these pieces, we'll talk about some of the tools a little bit later on, but the ALICE, the Alberta, I can never remember the acronym, Alberta Learning Information something, but it's alice.ca. They have tons and tons of great resources for how to understand skills and strengths, and to understand the different areas of employment that are out there. And they have like skills quizzes, values quizzes, things like that, where you can help identify those things. If you're coming at it from a place where you're not really sure of what you want to do whatsoever, that ALICE website is a really great place to start. And volunteering. If never worked before, and again, you're on a wait list, and trying to figure out what to do in the meantime, volunteering can be a great way to understand, okay, maybe I want to do something that's related to the nonprofit sector because I've been volunteering in a nonprofit for a while, or volunteering in a data entry capacity, something like that. But volunteering can sometimes be that first step and give you those references if there are none.
Yeah.
Ooh, we lost our page. There we go. True and false again. More questions for you guys. Okay. So, true or false? Hobbies don't give you insights into your skills. And for the second question, true or false? On average, the most expensive one-time cost for accommodating somebody in the workplace is $850. So if you guys want to throw in some answers, and if you have questions at any point, let us know, or if you just want to save them to the end, like Sahana said, that's okay too. All right, we'll give you guys a little bit more time. Okay. All right, we're going to end the polling and share the results. So we had on the first one that hobbies don't give you insight into your skills. So we had a bit of a split on each of the questions this time, which makes it a little more exciting to find out the answer. So the first one, hobbies can help give you some insights into your skills. And for the second question, on average, the most expensive one-time cost for accommodating somebody is $850. We've seen on average, the numbers tell us about $500. All right.
So just to add to that a little bit, I worked with a young man one time who loved putting puzzles together. He could put a puzzle together, 1,000-piece puzzle together in like a day. He loved it. And it was his hobby. And he finally got a job and apprenticed as a tiler, doing floor tiles. Yeah, and it was such a good fit for him. So it really can help. So we talked a little bit about understanding what your skills and strengths and interests are. There is a difference between the soft skills and the hard skills. They're all necessary but they may not all be necessary in the same job. So soft skills are things like memory and listening and emotional control of etiquette, where hard skills are writing, math, computer skills, physical strength, money counting, things like that. As Ashley said, the Alice website is great for finding out what some of your skills and strengths are. There's also, and I kind of put this in regularly because it was really beneficial for me, the Myers-Briggs Trait Inventory. And the website is there. It's humanmetrics.com. It'll give you a reading of 4 different dichotomies, introvert, extrovert, sensing, perceiving, intuition. Oh, I can't even remember. Anyway, there's 4 different dichotomies. You end up with a type of 4 different letters, and it'll break it down and tell you what some of your strengths and skills are and some of your stressors as well, and maybe some support for when you get stressed, what you can do.
And all of these things are so important if you are waiting on a wait list, to try and see if you can find out through any part of your life where those strengths are. Because if you know those, whoever is looking for a job is well ahead of the curve when they come on for when we're supporting them in employment. Lots of times if we're working with somebody and they don't know their skills at all, it can be hard to pull and try and figure that out. So while you're waiting, trying those different quizzes online maybe just even writing a list of what your hobbies are, and then talking through the different skills, or soft skills or hard skills that you use in those different hobbies. Something like playing baseball as a hobby, you are being physically active, you're standing a lot, you're working as part of a team. Like, those are all really good work-oriented skills that you can translate from a hobby.
Some of the things to consider when you're trying to figure out what your skills and strengths are and interests are: what books do you like to read? What movies do you watch? Podcasts you listen to? Those really will give you a clue of what interests maybe you have. What do you and your friends enjoy doing together? Do you belong to any clubs or groups? Again, what are your hobbies? Like Ashley's already mentioned that. Do you do anything that's entrepreneurial? This question is asked when we do our exploration, and people are always amazed. They say typically right away, no. But when they start thinking, they go, oh, I bake, or I sing, or I play an instrument. So have you volunteered in the past? And if you haven't, where would you like to volunteer? If you could do it anywhere. Now, what community activities do you enjoy the most? So that's just a real snapshot of some of the questions we would ask, but there are things that you could also consider when trying to determine what your skills, strengths, and interests are.
Yeah, and sometimes it can feel hard to, pull that stuff in, whether you're supporting somebody to find out what their skills or interests are. Sometimes it might be good to have a group of people together talking, because sometimes what one person thinks or knows that, they say do with a brother or sister as a hobby, you can pull and have those conversations as a whole and kind of pull that information together.
And something to really be aware of as well is what your barriers or hurdles are. Because we ignore them, they get bigger. So do you have any health restrictions? Do you take medications that will not allow you to get up in the morning? Or, are you allergic to dust because you don't want to work in a warehouse then? Those kind of things. What challenges do you experience with your diagnosis? And have you found ways to mitigate those challenges? Or do you need to have them accommodated? What habits, idiosyncrasies, or routines do you have that might interfere with work? And do you know what accommodations that you might need? Sometimes that's really hard if you've never worked and you don't know what accommodations you need.
And sometimes it's worth looking at just everyday activities and the accommodations that are maybe taken into account when doing those everyday activities, like accessing the community or going out to eat, whatever it might be. If there's certain accommodations needed, then you can think that, okay, maybe how would this translate into an employment setting too? And knowing that ahead of time is really beneficial. And if you are deciding to start the job search process while you're waiting, and you do get an interview, and you do want to feel comfortable advocating for yourself, it's important to know these beforehand.
Ashley and Vicky, I have a question. So as you know, our audience members are caregivers. So they're here to learn about employment and opportunities and pre-employment opportunities for their children. So as from that perspective, as I hear what you guys are presenting right now, are these, a caregiver knows their young person quite intimately, their loved one quite intimately, and they have seen the barriers throughout their young person's lifetime. And so they see a lot of hurdles, right? Especially as they're helping their loved one navigate school from a very early age, navigate community life. And so much of it is outside of their control. A lot of the times the barriers are not what their child is experiencing, but what the society imposes on that child. So with that in mind, and if you had to, since caregivers are the audience members, like what is your advice on how they need to be considering these questions? Because these are good questions, but they may seem like a rabbit hole for a caregiver. And it's hard to know, okay, that's cool. Julie just said that her daughter is also attending, which is amazing. That's really good to know, Julie. Yeah, so what are your thoughts on how one can think about these questions themselves and still feel positive?
You know, sometimes I do find that it is really helpful to talk with somebody who knows your child, but that isn't maybe directly in the family, because sometimes having that third person, that outside perspective, can be really beneficial. Because lots of times you have that relationship with your son or daughter, and that's a specific way, and you see them in that light because you've had that experience. But sometimes it just takes that other person to kind of say, oh, hey, have you noticed this, or have you seen that? So it might be, you know, if there's a family friend that's, you know, that you're really close with, that you want to engage in this process, you can maybe get them to help consider some of those questions too. Because yeah, sometimes, you know, I know for myself even, I'm totally different around my parents than I am around my colleagues. So you also have those different relationships, and there's different expectations, and the way I will react in those situations is different based on who I'm communicating with.
Okay. And what about the part where the barriers are not really the individual's barriers, but what is being imposed on them? How do you negotiate that?
So then typically the barriers, once somebody is employed, that's our job to negotiate with the employer. But there's sometimes barriers that are imposed even during the job search. For an example, some of the recruiting methods are present barriers for people with disabilities. And again, it's really good to do your research, figure out what company you're applying to. We kind of recommend don't apply on Indeed or things like that. If you're going to apply right to the company website. If you can find the name of the CEO or a manager, apply to them. That eliminates some of those barriers. And I think, you know, with my brother, I know him different than some of his other brothers and sisters. And so I tend to allow him to risk a little bit more in certain things. Some of the others will take his hand and fill his plate and, you know, walk him to the bathroom. And I say, you can do that yourself. So I think risk is, you know, allowing that dignity of risk is really important.
Thanks.
And when it comes to some of those barriers that society might put in place, unfortunately, sometimes you do have to advocate for yourself. And that can be very difficult and very intimidating to do, especially in a society that's built to disincent, like, so that you don't want to advocate for yourself. But on many different employment websites, there is a phone number or an email where you can request accommodations. And so recommend that if you are applying and you might face barriers for, say, setting up an interview, or you need to make sure the interviewing place is accessible, I would always look for that. And if not, then calling the reception and asking who you can speak to about accommodations for that piece.
Thanks.
Yeah, and so employers do have a duty to accommodate. And some of those accommodations are so simple, but they don't see them right away. And again, that's where employment supports can help you, or even, you know, having that ability to advocate for yourself. Like I remember one young man, all he needed was a stress mat. And once we have that put in place, and the employer's like, why didn't I think of that? Right? So disclosing disability is always a question we get. Shall I disclose? So when somebody gets support from us, the employers will already know that that person lives with a disability. And when we phone and advocate for them, then the employer already knows that. But if you're on a wait list and you're wondering, shall I disclose or not? It's really an individual decision. And I think some of the considerations are, would you put yourself or others at risk by disclosing? Have you been misunderstood in the past because you didn't disclose? Yeah. Disclosing may give your employer opportunity to ask you questions and gain knowledge about your disability. Be prepared to answer any questions or concerns the employer might have should you disclose. So I'm sorry, you asked what we mean by a wait list. At Gateway Association, we have a wait list for people wanting to come into our supports that's about a year long. So one of the young men that I supported in finding a job, he had applied for the job, and I phoned to follow up, and the manager said, you know, we began talking, and she's like, well, you didn't do very well during the interview. And I said, well, that makes sense, you know, in part because I know him, I would tell you that makes sense. And then I said to her, do you know that he lives with autism? And she went, oh, now I understand. Okay. And so then she was willing to give him a chance. He's been there nearly 3 years now with that same company.
Yeah, disclosing, it can be a very personal and a very scary decision to be making about disclosing, you know, for fear of being discriminated against. But we have found with our expertise and history that disclosing helps get rid of, maybe isn't looking somebody in the eye in an interview because they live with autism and that's hard for them. An interviewer might take that as they're not interested in the job. So understanding where your comfort level lies for being able to disclose is a really important thing to consider while you're on the waitlist, because it does have a big impact for employment, unfortunately. All right, now we are at our next true or false. All right, so this time we have 3 questions for you guys. So true or false, you should have one resume you use to submit online without any formatting whatsoever, including headers and footers. The second question, true or false, it is acceptable to use a font smaller than 11 points on a resume. And true or false, it's okay to put your picture on a resume. So we know there is lots of different resume writing and resume courses out there that you can access. And there are great ones out there. We just wanted to make sure that if you are on the waitlist and you want to get some of this stuff done yourself, that you know the most important points. So if you are supporting, say, your son or daughter in employment, you can know how maybe to help them tailor their resume. Okay. So it looks like we have everybody who has voted, and I will start sharing our results. Awesome. So the first one, false. So that's a very interesting one because you should have one resume that has no formatting whatsoever. Because when you are applying online, if you have formatting, if you're going through an online application system, say through Home Depot, they have an online application system through their website, formatting will completely jumble up your resume so that it's not readable. So if you are on the wait list and applying places and you keep wondering why you're not hearing and you're always applying online through those sort of systems and you have maybe really gorgeous formatting on your resume, that could be the reason why it's not working. The next point, it's acceptable to use a font smaller than 11 points. Yes, false. You don't want to use anything smaller because recruiters won't be able to read it, and an average recruiter will take between 5 and 10 seconds to skim a resume, so you want them to be able to read it really easily. And it's okay to put your picture on the resume. So there are some mixed ideas on this one, and people have to be comfortable with it. There is a new format of video resumes, which work really well for some people. We, in a general sense, don't like to have that sort of information on a resume because it can give an excuse or a reason for people to have bias, whether it's outward being discriminatory, or just they see it for whatever reason, they decide they don't want to hire you. So we generally recommend not to have a picture on there. All right. All right. Back to our next one.
Sorry, Ashley, I just wanted to say that there is a storm brewing in the west end of town, and so it is possible that Vicky may have some connection issues, and then Ashley will be presenting on her own. But I just wanted to say right now the internet can be down due to weather, so just it's heads up for our viewers as well. Take it away, Ash.
I'm back.
Oh, perfect.
I'm back.
Awesome. So we're just about to start talking about resumes and cover letters. And again, like I said, it's just a quick overview. So if you do want to start,
Hello.
you want to support somebody in doing that while you're waiting, then you can. So making sure it's current, no spelling or grammar errors, that it's honest, because employers will check that with references, and listing the skills that an employer has used in the ad. That's one that's a really big one. There is human resource software out there that will pull resumes that have the skills that they're looking for from a job ad. So if a job ad says organized, punctual, reliable, if you don't have those words in your resume, you're going to be screened out. So include examples of where you've shown leadership or gotten accolades. So this might be something that you want to sit down with your son or daughter, or whoever you're supporting, whoever your loved one might be, to talk about these different points and ensure that it's on a resume if that's something they want to be submitting while they're waiting. So have one that you can modify regularly, and again, without any of that formatting or any of those pieces. And then if you are doing in-person resumes, which there isn't a lot of that going on right now with COVID, as that presents a bit of a challenge, having one that has the formatting and design for in-person only, where you're going into the store and physically handing it to someone, can help it stand out. But again, online, don't want any of that. And just even if you are the one, say, writing a resume for your son or daughter, have somebody else review it, because having a second set of eyes can be very helpful. So there's just two types of resumes. We won't go really into this too much, but there's the chronological, so time-based, starting with work history, if that's if there's extensive work history or that's the most relevant. But for somebody who's never worked before or is new, only had one job, having a skills-based resume is what you want to look for or support somebody to create. And so that's where you can really highlight what they're great at, and maybe you're pulling things from the different hobbies and those soft skills and making sure that those are on there. And then cover letters. Oh, can you see that? Sorry, it was glitching on my end. Yeah, so there are lots of job applications that specifically at the bottom will say to submit a cover letter, and applications without a cover letter will not be considered. So that's something that, based off our experience, has been very important to keep an eye out for. So if you are supporting somebody to help job search, or you want to give them some tips for how to do it on their own, keeping that in mind can be very important. And again, making sure that you're responding to the stuff they're talking about in the job ad and checking your spelling and grammar and reviewing it. Okay, the fun part, we'll do more true and false. I think this is our last one, so we won't have too many more polls going out. So, and only 2 questions this time, not 3. So, true or false? Networking is an important part of job searching. Or you need to meet every single criteria on a job posting in order to apply for it. So we'll give you guys a couple seconds. Awesome. All right. And we'll share the results. Yes, so networking is one of the most important pieces. So whether it's, if your loved one is a part of community groups or hobby groups or anything like that, even mentioning in those groups that they're looking for employment can be really helpful, because you never know who they know that might be hiring. And you need to meet every single criteria. No, you don't. Typically in job ads, they'll post the most important stuff at the top and the least important stuff at the bottom. All right. So some practical tips. So job searching. Sorry, it keeps going away on me here. All right. So job banks like Alice, Indeed, the Alberta Job Bank are really important resources to look at. And again, talking to family, friends, community connections. There are now virtual job fairs, which might be something to look into. And even if, say, you're supporting someone who's maybe not quite ready to have a job, but they want to start maybe looking in the next year, attending job fairs and some of those things right now can just be a good way to get used to learning how to talk to an employer, discovering what questions you might want to ask when you're learning about a position or a workplace, and using LinkedIn if possible. And you can always follow up with a phone call to human resources. So this is a question we get asked a lot, is how do I take the skills and what I want to do and my passions and put that into a job? Sometimes you get stuck at that piece where you know what you can offer an employer and you know what you want to do, but how do you align that? So creating a list of things that you love to do or are really good at, even if you're just, like I said before, brainstorming as a group or with loved ones and friends, can kind of help pick out what you really like. And knowing what your loved one doesn't like is also really important. And sometimes as a caregiver, you may assume certain pieces of these things, but it's important to kind of give space to ask and to find out those things, because sometimes it might surprise you. And using these as a reference when you're job searching. So if somebody, doesn't like standing all day or counting money, then maybe staying away from positions where it's a cashier, things like that. And an industry may include those, then it's not a good fit. And one of the reasons why we really wanted to talk about this piece is if you don't have a good understanding of these things, then it's hard to move forward with employment. So sometimes it might take just trying to understand skills and passions first before moving on to the next step. Sorry, my screen keeps going blank. So how to align your career goals with industry. Honestly, my biggest suggestion is Google. Just Google everything. Even if you think it's not something that is Googleable, Google it. So if your son or child or loved one wants to do something that's with technology, Googling jobs that are good with, that require technology skills, or jobs that require good memory, and Google those pieces can be very helpful. Or jobs that match working overnight, if somebody prefers to be working overnight rather than through the day, and that's part of the accommodation that they may want. So honestly, just Google everything. That's my best.
Research is really, really important to do your research.
Yeah, and it sometimes can be hard as a caregiver to carve out this time. and try and find space to do that in a day when there's always a million and one things going on. So again, that Alice resource is a great spot for people to go and really learn about those industries and get to know it. And if you've found one industry that your son or daughter or loved one really loves, then Googling stuff similar to that to find other job industries. So, you know, for example, jobs similar to a doggy daycare worker, and a vet tech might come up as an option. So Google is that resource that can be super important to kind of help find those things. Next is our tools and resources. So this is Alice, the Alberta Learning Information Services. That's the full acronym. That's a great one, like we've mentioned, and the Job Accommodation Network. So if your son or daughter has, say, been offered a job and you would like to know what accommodations you can potentially recommend for your son or daughter to talk about when they start their job, going to the Job Accommodation Network is a fabulous place to start, because there's tons of different solutions and recommendations for different accommodations. So our online employment topic videos that we'll have posted, we're going to have them on a bunch of different things, so that'll be a good resource. And then our online employment conversations that we have every second Wednesday. Our conversation today was around leadership and what that looks like and how to build skills as a leader. And then we have a document, if anybody would like, building a routine document. So when you're job searching, or you're supporting your loved one for job searching, or just getting ready for employment, whether that's volunteering or things like that, building that routine can be really important, even if it's no job, no volunteer experience yet. Building that routine now can be really important to help support them once they are getting that job, or once they're in getting employment support wherever. And then we also have an interview checklist document as well. So that kind of runs through the most important conversations and things to know, like, how are you going to get there? What questions do you want to ask the employer? Have you followed up with your references? Things like that. So sometimes those are things that can be overlooked. And we also have our employment resource booklet, which encompasses a lot of the topics that we've talked about today, and all in one nice summary. So yeah, and that one also talks a little bit about some occupational health and safety pieces too. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Ash. And thanks, Vicky. I have a few questions, but I'd like to open up the questions for others. Julie, Michelle, Ella, Christine.
I think I guess I was surprised that there's a long wait, and I was I guess this is just the first seminar that we're attending, sort of to help direct Ella in her sort of planning for the future. So this is just sort of eye-opening.
Yeah, there's a lot of different components that come into being ready for employment and job searching and those pieces, unfortunately.
And Julie and Ella, one of the reasons we are covering employment in this series is waitlists are quite common no matter which agency one goes to. And quite often what we keep hearing is that there's a lot one could do. Get on the waitlist, call Gateway Intake for employment, get on the waitlist. But then what Ashley and Vicky talked about today are things that you could do while you're waiting. And even if that means some volunteer opportunities, if that means and other, maybe part-time, like one-day job opportunities, whatever is out there to build your resume. Ashley and Vicky, could you maybe speak a little bit about go over the pre-employment training that Gateway is offering right now? What does that look like?
So we have a number of workshops, or I'm sorry, we are developing workshops. They're not ready yet, but we currently have online conversations. So they happen every second Wednesday. There's a Zoom link. The information is on our website, as well as on our newsletter. And you just have to register through Eventbrite, and then we'll send you the link. There's a host of different topics, from leadership to getting ready to online resumes or applications, just all kinds of things. So that's part of it.
Awesome. And Vicky, the online conversations, as from an outsider perspective, I think are pretty close to real-time training, because you're talking to job seekers or even people who have had employment in the past or are currently employed, coming online to talk to you guys about various topics, right? So they're learning a lot about the labor market. They're learning a lot about how to cope individually, emotionally, socially during COVID and otherwise, and you're creating opportunities for people to share tips, and you're bringing in some experts into the conversation. So it is more than an online conversation. I would suggest it is real-time opportunity to talk to peers who are on the same journey as you, and the learning that comes out of it is perhaps more pivotal than a 5-hour workshop. Would you say?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I know that there was a lot of information that we talked about today, and if I could just stress, understanding skills and what you want to do, that's the biggest foundation to employment and to a job. You can adjust your sleep schedule, although we recommend that to work on that well before, but that is something you can adjust. Mm-hmm. Knowing your skills and understanding your passions and where you want to work, that can take time and that can take experiences. It could even just be, mentorship. We do have a mentorability as well that that Gateway is doing, where you can sign up to be mentored in an area that you think you might like. So you can talk to somebody for an hour or half a day and just learn about what that field is like. Or if you have family and friends in a field that you want to work in, talk to them about what their job is like. Find out what the day-to-day is. So those are some steps that you can also take to kind of get started.
Mm-hmm. And how can you sign up for mentorability mentorship?
So we do have the form on the Gateway Association website. It is also built into our employment supports waitlist application. So if you do want to put your name in for the waitlist, the mentorability form is on there as well too. Okay.
So in the chat, there are a couple of questions. I'm going to pose it to you in a second. But for folks, if you're not receiving Gateway's newsletters, I've put an email down there to sign up for newsletters. And this is the link for the Mentorability project. Please feel free to fill out the online application, as Ashley said, and you can sign up for it. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, Ash and Vic. Where can we find the documents you were talking about in the last slide?
So those ones we can email out to you. I think we have some of them on our website, but some of them aren't. The employment resource booklet, that is on our website under the job seeker tab on the Gateway Association website. The other ones, if you would like those, we can send them.
Okay, so what we typically do, Ashley and Vicky and our audience members today, is we are putting together all the people that have signed up, registered for this event on one big spreadsheet. And as resources come up, we are emailing the whole group so that they have they have these documents as a follow-up. So Ashley, if you can email me all the documents that's on the last slide, then I will make sure that all the folks registered get it. So even if they didn't attend today's event, but they're registered through Eventbrite, they will receive the documents. Okay, so next question. Is there a form or application to complete to be on the wait list?
Yes, there is. We can make sure that's included in what everybody gets sent out to.
Okay, sounds good.
And our application, it's very short. It's just to kind of capture a little bit about yourself or the person, your loved one, or whoever might be filling out that application. So it's always just fill it out to the best of your ability.
Okay. What are some topics you guys cover during online conversations? Maybe you can share the ones that you've done so far.
Go ahead.
We've done, we've covered interview strategies
Okay.
during COVID and not. We've covered whether you're working from home or laid off, how to manage employment stress. Your mental health during COVID, leadership, time management, job exploration, knowing your skills and strengths. Oh, that's next week. Or in 2 weeks, that is.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the ones that we have covered. We're going to do a mock interview in the future so that it'll give you some interview strategies.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about how you can maintain a job once you have it. What are some good tips?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And do you guys have them recorded and available for folks to watch?
Yes, we have some of them.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. And can you also email me those links so that I can send it out to all the participants?
Mhm.
Thank you. Okay. So since there are just a few people on today's evening session, there is opportunity for people to share their particular stories or particular questions to get more from Vicky and Ashley, because I think specific situations will warrant more elaborate answers than you would receive in a presentation. Ella, do you have a question? Michelle, Christine, Julie. You can share your situation to get some tips. And while you guys are thinking of that, I'll ask a couple of questions. So Ashley and Vicky, do both of you do explorations for job seekers that you're working with?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and so let's kind of walk me through the scenario. So I fill out a form, I'm on your wait list, and then do I get a call right away? Do I get an email, or do I have to wait for a while?
So you'll typically get an email that confirms that we have received your waitlist application. And then, yes, there might be a bit of a wait. We are building those employment conversations for people who are on the wait list to be able to take in the meantime while you are waiting, to help get yourself prepared. But then once we do take you off the wait list, you'll receive a call from myself or Vicky saying, you're up on the wait list. We'd like to schedule an appointment for you to come in and start the exploration process.
Okay. And the exploration process, how long does that usually take? Is there an average time, or it depends on the person? And do you give as much time as needed to that individual?
Yeah, we give as much time as needed. We really need to understand the skills and strengths and interests of the person, and we need to build some trust. We need to understand what your barriers are so we can ensure that you get the accommodations that are necessary. So there is no tried or true, takes 2 months, takes 7 months. It all depends. We work in partnership with the job seeker, and so we're going to give you homework, we're going to ask you to do things, and the more we can cooperate and work together, usually the shorter the process is.
And some of the things that might come up through the exploration process is discovering that maybe schooling might be the right thing. And if you want to, maybe decide you want to go back to school for a couple of years, or go back to school for a course that's maybe a month or too long. But those are some of the things that can come up as well.
It sounds like since you're working in partnership, the job seeker is also getting to know themselves, and you're getting to know them. So there's a lot of new information that is being uncovered and detangled. During those times, what are some changes you see in the individual in terms of their energy and interests? Are there times when they get more scared of, all the things that maybe they see as barriers, or do you find that most people are pretty excited for the next step? No answer is wrong.
I think it's the whole gamut. Some people come to us already so excited and really ready to take the next step, and some are so unsure and don't know what the next steps are and are kind of afraid to take them. And so I think we get the whole gamut. And as we build that relationship, and as there's more trust and there's more, we can give more recommendations, and they get to learn a little bit. The job seeker learns a little bit more about themselves, then we see more excitement build. But sometimes it's scary. It's like, oh, now I discover I really want to work with animals, and in order to work with animals, I really got to go to school. And I didn't really want to go to school before, but I really want to work with animals. And so, it's all of that angst and that scariness, but the excitement at the same time.
And I will say, I do find our society typically tries to make us be really humble and to not speak about our skills and our gifts and our strengths. And I found that many people, you start pulling these pieces and talking to them about the different things that they're doing, and maybe they've given a speech to their hobby group, and that's pulling some leadership and some public speaking skills, and discovering that they you have these skills and that stuff that employers want. I find people can be very, because you don't want to talk about what's good. Sometimes you don't want to feel like you're bragging, but we encourage that greatly. We want to hear all those great things, because everybody's got skills. They may look different, but everybody has them.
Awesome. We'll continue zeroing in on what exploration looks like, but I'm going to throw some questions at you first from the chat. Ella asks, do you have any resources relating to knowing your rights as an employee with disabilities?
That is a topic that we are building specifically for the people who are on our waitlist. We don't have that as an online employment discussion as of yet, but that will be a workshop that will be available in the near future. So we do have some resources on that too. And the Alberta Healthy Workers, I can never remember the full acronym, but there's a website. I will post it in the chat once I find it, but there's a great resource on there for all rights and occupational health and safety concerns and things like that.
Yeah. Thanks, Ashley. If you can find that for us, that's great. Vicky, did you have any take on that question when it comes to knowing your rights as an employee with disabilities? Can you maybe, Vicky, tell us a story? And I know you love stories. Is there one where, you were working with a job seeker who secured employment and then needed to assert their rights? Can you share what that story went around like?
So I supported a young man well, actually he got his, we supported him finding one job, and then he got another job on his own. And he'd been working there for about a year and a half. And a new manager came on. And for some reason, this manager didn't appreciate the skills that he had to offer. And so she began calling him into her office on a regular basis. And pretty soon there were 5 times he was called into the office within 2-week period. And she told him that she was trying to build his capacity, but it really looked like bullying. And so he came to me and asked me if that was the case. And when he related some of the things that were being said to him, it really was a case of being bullied. And so I helped him try and advocate for himself. When that didn't do any good, then I went and met with the store manager, with his supervisor, and with the head of HR. So he didn't even know for sure that it was bullying, and he didn't know what to do with it. And he is such a nice kid. I can call him a kid. He's a young man, but he's younger than all of my kids. Anyway, all he would say was, "Please don't get her fired, Vicky." So, you know, he didn't know. He didn't even know that he was being bullied. Does that help?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm hearing you also say is that um, employee rights aside, at Gateway, but during exploration and during the trust building and relationship building that you do with job seekers, that's the kind of the goal behind the trust building, is that they will come to you as soon as something feels out of not right, as soon as something feels weird, and they're able to actually speak about it, because a lot of the times people don't know that their rights are being abused. And
Exactly.
so being able to have someone to talk to, whether it's you guys or even with your family members, someone that you're trusting and sharing your experiences with, and maybe that person has some distance to look at what's going on and support them to recognize what's happening and then take action. So I think as much as we may know our rights, if we don't have someone to actually reflect that with and have that conversation with, then we may not always be able to exercise our rights.
Yeah, and sometimes that can feel scary if you're afraid of reprisal. But again, that again is another right that they would be violating. But yes, it can feel very daunting if you are afraid of speaking up because you're afraid of losing your job. So even if you talk to someone and, you know, say it's a family member and you can't do anything to help resolve the work situation as it is, just talking so that you're not keeping that stress and holding on to that, because that can really affect you too.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks. And Ella, check out that link Ashley has posted and let us know what you think. Ashley, do you mind putting down your email down there, yours and Vicky, so that Ella can reach out if she needs? Okay. So Julie has a question. She says, who would one talk to about options for independent living and help with post-secondary education?
Gateway, our family support team, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert at all on post-secondary education resources. Ashley, do you know somebody?
Not someone specifically, but there is Deb and Avril that are part of the chat team that can offer lots of different resources. Many of the bigger schools like the University of Alberta, MacEwan University, and that they do have supports for students who live with disabilities on site as well. But again, I know sometimes wading through that can be difficult.
Julie, your question about who can you talk to about independent living. So couple of pieces. One is we are focusing our conversation on those that are not eligible for PDD. And I'm guessing that that's the spirit in which you're asking the question. And last week, we had Deb Bilfil and Avril Frost, who are the region's integrated transition specialists. And they work in partnership with child welfare as well as disability services. So I'm going to post their email down in a second. They are specifically, their roles were created because not everybody that has received supports up to the point of 18 are eligible for PDD, and hence their role is to help those particular folks of all ages, anyone over the age of 18, to actually not only access the resources, but they also make sure they follow up with you to make sure that those resources work for you and are available for you. So I'm going to post their emails down here, but they are definitely people that you can reach out to as well. If you, I'm going to be, in a couple of minutes, I'll be posting the web link for this event series where we have posted a bunch of videos from the past sessions. One of them is with Deb and Avril. So please feel free to see that video and get more information on how Deb and Avril can help you. In the meantime, I have a question here that I want to post.
Can I add to that a little bit, Sahana? So the Alice website will give you information on if you have a career choice, what education you will need. So it's a really, really good resource. And then from there, again, Google can help a lot in finding out which schools offer the education that you need.
Yes, that's that. So the Alice website that you mentioned, can you actually type that up? Because I don't know if people know what that is.
Yeah, it's on the resource page that we are going to send.
Okay. And Deb Bilfil. Okay, so I posted the email for Integrated Transition Specialist, Deb Bilfil. Please email her, tell her you got her email through Gateway's online session, and present your situation, and they are more than happy to actually do some planning with you. They don't just offer up resources, which they can if that's all you need, but they're happy to sit down and do some planning with you. So that's an option as well. And if, let's say, you were on the Gateway waitlist and it was your turn to work with Ashley and Vicky, and those were indeed some questions that still remain, then Vicky and Ashley can pull in the family support team, which is Betty and Unique, to help address those questions. But in the meantime, I highly suggest Deb Bilfil at gov.ab.ca. Her email's in the chat. Those guys have some really good contacts. So let's say it's housing. They will speak to the person who does all the intakes for the houses or housing centers and make sure that you get an appointment. So they go that far, and they'll bring them into the conversation if needed. So they're pretty good. All right, Michelle has a question. She says, I can tell you that my son received an aide type person who was a scribe, took notes for him at NATE. Yes, I see Ash and Vicky nodding. Indeed, NATE has accommodations for students with disability. So does University of Alberta and Grand McEwen. I believe Northwest has some courses specifically for adults with disabilities. But I think in terms of accommodating disabilities in typical coursework, I don't think they're quite far ahead in that. In any case, coincidentally, next Wednesday's online session is in conversation with Dr. Doty, who is the Assistant Dean for Student Success at University of Alberta. She will be talking to me about accommodations available at University of Alberta and resources that they have and how they're working during COVID. So please tune in for next Wednesday's conversation with Dr. Doty. Next. Okay, so Christine asks, just checking, you help an individual until they get a job, no time restriction?
No time restriction. In fact, it's not just till they get a job, but for the life of the job as well. So we've had some people that we've been supporting since the beginning of our employment initiative.
Yeah, or we'll help people progress through a job, whether it's from entry level moving up to maybe a management position. We'll help support in that as well. So it's ongoing for as long as that person wants to receive the support from us. That is also part of why we have a little bit longer of a wait list, is because we do have that individualized ongoing support.
And if I may add, you guys are very humble. The employment team also supports the employer to build their capacity in the process. So, it may not be a situation that whether it's the employee calling Ash and Vicky for support, or whether it's the employer calling them, over a period of time, both parties are learning how to deal with it on their own, right? And so I think that is a really important aspect, because we want inclusive employers to grow in numbers. We want them to hire more people. So building their capacity only serves us in the long run, and the community at large. So we'll just wait for more questions to trickle in, but I wanted to kind of move along from the exploration phase into the next phase, which is job search. But quick question, during exploration, you guys mentioned that there's a Myers-Briggs test, that's an online tool that you do use. Are there any other formal assessments that you guys use to help the person, or is it based on conversation and relationship building?
Yeah, it's all fairly individualized based off what the person is looking for. So if somebody, say, maybe wants something where they're doing data entry, or might be using Excel quite a bit, we can help support them in resources, free resources where they can practice those skills or see what their data entry or words per minute are. So we can support in that way. But at this point in time, we don't have any overall assessment or anything that we do on a consistent basis.
Okay, so it's you're basically tailoring everything from the very first conversation till the very end of maintenance. Everything is tailored around that person, and hence the amount of time investment in the process, and hence the success as well, right? Okay, so job search, how does that happen? They've identified what kind of skills that they have, their interests, what gets them excited, and then you guys would suggest, say, I don't know, you like working with numbers, and so maybe some upgrading is needed, but otherwise you're now upgraded, you're ready for work. Who finds the jobs?
So that again is in partnership. So that's where job seekers that we're working with would be searching and applying, and we will also be searching and sending those job postings and getting them to apply as well. And one of the things that we really appreciate when we're doing the job search partnership is feedback on, maybe if we sent them 4 postings and 2 of them are ones that just absolutely don't work. Having that constant communication and feedback is so key to making this a successful process, because if we know that something just isn't a fit, then we can help eliminate those issues and point you in a direction that's going to be the most beneficial and help you be the most successful in that role. But it's that partnership. We do have some employers that we have good partners with, but we would only ever approach them if that's a good fit. So we never place people into places where we think that they fit. It has to be where the person wants to work or the role they want to do.
And before we even start that, we would ensure that the resumes, that they have a couple of resumes, that they have a cover letter that they can modify at a moment's notice. Yeah, those things are done as part of job search, but initially.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have conversations with employers. So that's the part where we spend a lot of our time, is phoning up those employers and talking to them and talking about the skills and why that job seeker is the perfect person for that job. So, you know, with us supporting and doing that role, we can, like very recently, called up an employer, spoke to them, and they had well over 500 resumes that they were dealing with for one data entry position. With that phone call, the job seeker I was working with was immediately given an interview because of that conversation and talking about how that person really fits the job that that employer has and what they're looking for.
And was that a cold call, Ashley, or did you know that employer?
No, that was a cold call.
That's really interesting. So you are able to, you know, enough about the individual and you know enough about the benefits of inclusive hiring, and you're able to job carve for them that you're able to present the business case almost for why this would be a good hire.
Yeah. And that relationship and the communication with the job seeker and getting to know them is so key. And because if we don't know you and we can't talk about you because, you know, if we just haven't been able to meet enough or whatever is hindering that process, then it's can really hinder us talking to employers and saying all the really good skills that you have and why you're such a fit.
That's awesome. As you know, speaking from the caregiver perspective and having supported younger people looking for jobs in the past, I can say that a lot of the times we rely on, we think, okay, there's an employment agency, they're going to solve this problem for us. And we kind of go in there without preparation. And what I'm really picking up from today's conversation is that there is so much one could be doing before you even get there. And that would help make the job easier, kind of faster in a way. And at the same time, I will mention a barrier is going to be when you know someone very well. We may not be able to see all aspects of themselves, and we have different relationships with our loved ones. So those conversations on what you could be doing with your son or daughter, or what your son and daughter could be doing in terms of answering certain questions for themselves. It's going to take some effort, but I think it's possible if you kind of keep chugging at it and keep moving forward and trying again and again. And like you said earlier, have another trusted third party that you know to come be part of that conversation to help see things that we may not see ourselves. It's I mean, especially with COVID in the air, who knows when in-person meetings can happen, or even if meetings happen on the phone or via Zoom, there's still a matter of job search, which can be a little bit of a bigger hurdle than before. So, yeah.
And one of the great things about the Alice website that I do want to mention, especially from the caregiver perspective, is that you can create an account on there. So you can do the skills, the values, the environment, those quizzes and those pieces at little chunks at a time. So you can build that profile and keep coming back to it. So it's not something that you have to say, you know, take 5 hours and you're going to do it all in one night and support your loved one or son or daughter to be able to do that. But you can do one quiz one night and, you know, maybe the next week do another one that week and start building that profile and keep coming back to that and changing it, because you can redo those quizzes. And if, say, you've done all 5 and you're like, nope, all the stuff, the information it's giving me isn't what I think I want, then you can go back and adjust some of those. So that's why the Alice website is one of our top resources that we always tell people about.
Awesome. And since you both mentioned it so much, I looked it up and I posted it in chat. So please feel free to refer to that. Do you work with if you have to work with job seekers whose English is not their first language, how does that work? Do you?
You know, I've worked personally with people who, for various reasons, sometimes their speech is a little bit more difficult to understand. And I found, honestly, the in-person meetings were very helpful for that. Or, you know, having somebody who might, you know, if they're completely nonverbal or maybe don't speak English at all, having, you know, a third party accompany them to help support in that communication. But typically, yeah, we kind of find ways to work around it. And again, it's individual based.
Can you tell us a couple of stories about accommodations? How have you spoken to employers about accommodations, and an example of how a really simple accommodation saved a job?
So my favorite story is talking about the young man that I said all he needed was a stress mat. And so his boss first phoned me and said, this isn't working. You know, he works his butt off the first hour and a half, and then he takes a break and he comes back and we can't get any work out of him. So I said, okay, well, I'll come and see what's going on. And so I went and I stood at where he typically worked, and he comes walking back from the lunchroom and he's limping. And I said, well, what's the matter? And he said, my feet hurt. Well, he was standing on concrete for an hour and a half. And so of course his feet hurt, and he was wearing dress shoes. I don't know why. Well, I do know why. It's because that's what he thought was important. And so I said, oh my goodness, he needs a stress mat. And the employer said, I just never even thought of it. And we've got some, they're upstairs. So we went and got a stress mat and put it down for the guy. So a couple of weeks later, he phoned in and said, no, there's still something the matter, you know. He's not working up to par. And I said, did anybody tell him what par is? And he said, no, I don't think so. So I said, you know, if you will tell him what your expectations are, he'll meet and exceed them. 3 days later, he phoned me back and said, oh my God, you were right. He has exceeded expectations. He's doing fabulous. So, and he's still there, and he's been at that job for over 5 years, and it keeps growing. You know, they keep adding new duties and things like that. And yeah, he's well liked, and he really likes his job there. So there's one story. I got a million of them, so better let Ashley take a turn.
Yeah, one story that that comes to mind for me is supporting somebody who actually was nonverbal. So communicating was maybe sometimes a little bit more difficult for her. So we created a name tag for her so that people would know, because there was a couple times while she was interacting out on the floor, she was doing a retail job, that people got frustrated at her because she couldn't answer when they had questions to ask her. So we created something for her to be able to show them that she was nonverbal, and that she would let them know that somebody was going to come over and help them. So stuff like that, and then, you know, creating a visual checklist as well, I found can be very helpful. So just really small things like that, where we can go in and, you know, something where you could just pull up and say, you know, somebody will be over to help you, just one moment, please. Stuff like that can make a big difference.
We created a checklist for one woman who was working in a kitchen because she would forget her duties and what she had to do next. So we created a checklist for every station that she was at. The employer was so impressed with it. He managed a couple of different kitchens, and he implemented it in all of his kitchens. So that was a really cool one too.
Awesome. And then job search happens and recruitment process happens. Is the interview, do you guys sometimes go to the interview with the individual?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So you're there hand in hand.
We really leave it up to the individual whether they want us there or not. We don't want to be intrusive. And so, yeah, it's their choice whether they want us there or not.
Okay.
And we have, on the very rare occasion, encountered where a job seeker wants our support, but the employer doesn't want us to be there and won't let us come in the room. So again, that's where we make sure that we're supporting the person and building their capacity as much as we can, and even, you know, meeting them before and after the interview, but supporting them in those ways. So we do find ways around things if we encounter those little bumps and things that can happen sometimes.
We will do in-person interview training, and we try and have a panel of support staff with us that will ask questions, because sometimes the job seekers get so used to us, they're comfortable. So we'll bring in others from our team that they don't know, so that so we can do some interview training with them, and then we give them feedback on maybe think how they could answer the questions differently. Ashley has developed a really good interview checklist to make sure that things aren't forgotten. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we can talk, we also, again, everybody's so different, but, you know, somebody might need an accommodation at an interview where if you're very nervous, because that's something, interviews can be such a nerve-wracking and anxious situation that we talk about lots of different strategies to manage that beforehand or during the interview. So, you know, somebody who maybe has a hard time with fidgeting and wants it to be touching their hair or touching their face, especially right now, you know, maybe having a ring or something that they can fiddle with and touch instead of touching their face. So these are all pieces that we consider, and we'll talk about when helping somebody prepare for an interview too. Even here's an app to help you meditate before you go in to calm down, or, you know, here's these other 5 things you can try to help, you know, bring down your anxiety before an interview.
And we will talk to the employer as well. So, you know, we've called them an employer, and we've talked to them about the person already, and they say, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to bring them in for an interview. And so then we will say, this person is going to be very, very nervous. You know, you may not get anything but 1-word answers from them. You know, so we already, the employer will already have an understanding of what they may deal with. And we follow up after the interview as well.
Okay, awesome. And then you talked about how maintenance, you kind of help with the maintenance of the job as long as needed. To kind of circle this back to folks who are preparing themselves for employment while on waitlist, or while, you know, even not just the waitlist, while on job search, right? I want to revisit that volunteering conversation. I know that at Gateway, we believe in valued roles that everybody has in society. And if somebody's skills are, if they are valued, their skills are valued. And one marker for showing that people's skills are valued is employment, paid employment, right? So while paid employment is one of the good markers for inclusion, the volunteering, how can one think about volunteering in that scenario? What are your thoughts individually? I want to hear from both of you.
Typically, we won't recommend anybody volunteer at a for-profit. We don't want people making money off of the backs of their volunteers. But in a not-for-profit where there are other people who are volunteering, doing really valued roles, and you're working alongside of those co-workers, then those are the things we recommend. So if somebody doesn't know what their skills or strengths are, and you know they've done the research and things like that, and still are going, oh, I don't know, then you know we'd say, well, what are you interested in, and can you find some volunteer work in that area? Or again, the mentor abilities, and have an interview with an employer who can tell you what things are happening in their different organization and what jobs there are. So yeah, we wouldn't recommend somebody volunteer where there are no other volunteers. remember years ago when I worked at a different employment agency, they recommended people volunteer at a hairdressing shop and get paid in a haircut once every 3 months or so. And I went, well, who else? Who else gets paid in haircuts here? Like, well, nobody. Well, then that won't work here either. So, yeah, it's we recommend that you volunteer to get a reference, to learn some skills. So it's for your benefit to learn some skills, to get a reference, find out what your interests are, and to give back a little bit.
And time limited, right? To ensure that you're not being exploited.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Ash?
And there is job shadowing that people can do as well, where you are, if you are going into for-profit business, sometimes even making sure that you're framing it with the appropriate language of a job shadow, which is no longer than a day, to go in and see what that's like, because that is quite common when you are in university, going and doing a job shadow day at different organizations. But again, that's a day, and you may not actually be doing any work at all. You might just be there to see what people are doing. So even just the language around that can be so important. So volunteering in a for-profit business isn't, you don't want to do that at all. So a job shadow for a day in a for-profit business, yes, that is something that you can do and can be very beneficial. And that employment resource booklet, we also have a number of different volunteer websites for people to check out too.
Excellent, excellent. Awesome. I am good with my questions. I want to throw it back to the group. Any questions for our presenters? No rush. Take a minute. Okay. I think this may be it. Do you have any questions, Ashley and Vicky? Are you curious about anything?
I was gonna say, did you guys like the polls? That was the first time. So if you let me know if you liked them or not, because if not, then that's good feedback for us to know.
Okay. Julie has a question. Do you have any suggestions for volunteer opportunities right now? And she did like the polls.
What area of volunteering? Is it specific to a type of job like reception or warehousing, or like a sector like working with animals, or any of those pieces that you can, so we can maybe give you a little bit more insight on the potential volunteer opportunities?
Julie, feel free to unmute yourself and it sounds like this is kind of a back and forth conversation, so please feel free to unmute yourself.
Oh, I just wanted to know if there were, any successful volunteer sort of placements that you've had. Really, it would be something that Ella might like to explore. So
You might want to check Edmonton Volunteers. It's a just Google Edmonton Volunteers, and there's they have a host of opportunities there.
So one thing to keep in mind is that with COVID, the landscape for volunteer opportunities has changed quite a bit. One of the job seekers that I'm working with currently, she did volunteer at the food bank doing data entry for quite some time. And she was able to develop a really good reference from there. She really learned that she loves data entry and that she is so good at it and very, very detailed. So it was really good for her to do that experience and to find those pieces out. And the food bank does typically have quite a lot of volunteer opportunities. I do know that most of them are on hold right now with COVID and navigating that. But I have seen lots of virtual volunteer opportunities popping up too.
Yes, I'm posting some links down there about volunteer opportunities. I think the one Vicky was referring to is called Volunteer Alberta. .ab.ca. Please check that out. And then the food bank is definitely a good option. they do need people to be able to follow the protocols in terms of COVID safety. So that's something to think about. And then I have one more. Yeah, please check that out.
If you're looking to work with animals, Dogs with Wings is often looking for volunteers to socialize the puppies, which I think would be such a great job.
Especially some dogs of some of our staff members at Gateway. We need some training to stay within kennels. Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. Take care. I think we'll be wrapping it up for now as well. Thank you, Ashley and Vicky. I'm going to end the recording session in a second.